The headlights surged in my rearview mirror so suddenly that for a second I thought I'd imagined them. It was snowing hard outside Milwaukee that night, the kind of sideways winter storm that makes even familiar roads feel foreign. I was halfway through a curve near Highway 43 when I tapped the brakes. The pedal sank. My car didn't slow. It lurched. I remember the guardrail flashing past the world, tilting, the sensation of weightlessness for a heartbeat, and then the violent thud of the airbag exploding against my chest. Silence. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I heard wasn't Marissa's voice. It was a monitor. Beep, beep, beep. White ceiling, fluorescent light, my ribs wrapped tight in bandages, and an empty chair beside the bed. My name is Graham Cole. I'm 57 years old. I've managed logistics operations for nearly 3 decades. I've handled labor strikes, supply chain collapses, and audits that would have broken weaker men. But nothing in my life prepared me for waking up alone after nearly dying and realizing my wife hadn't stayed. Nurse Elena Ruiz was the first person to explain what happened. "You were lucky," she said, calmly checking my chart. "Broken ribs, concussion, no internal damage." "Where's my wife?" I asked. She hesitated. That pause told me more than her words did. "She brought you in," Elena said carefully. "Left your wallet at the desk, then she left." Left. Not stepped out. Not went home to rest. Left. I tried to rationalize it. Marissa hated hospitals. The smell, the fluorescent lights, the waiting. "She'll come back," I muttered. Elena didn't argue. She simply adjusted my IV and said, "You've had no visitors." That's when the first crack appeared. I asked for my phone. It wasn't in my belongings. The emergency room had locked my wallet, my watch, but no phone. Elena brought me a hospital tablet so I could check work messages. That's when the second crack formed. 3 days after the accident, not the first day, not while I was unconscious, but 3 days later, there were pending transfer requests from our joint savings account. The reason listed was anticipated medical expenses. I stared at the timestamp. Then I saw something that didn't fit. A beneficiary update request on my life insurance policy, submitted that same afternoon. My breathing slowed. Medical expenses made sense. Changing who receives a payout if I die, that didn't. Marissa and I had been married 12 years. She'd always liked nice things, spa memberships, boutique shopping weekends, but she'd never been reckless. At least that's what I believed. Then I remembered a conversation from a month ago. She had mentioned rising credit card balances. Temporary, she'd said. Just juggling things. I hadn't pressed. I wish I had. That afternoon, Elena returned with a different expression on her face. "Your wife called," she said. My chest tightened. "Is she coming back?" She asked whether you were still admitted. Still admitted? Not, "How are you?" Not, "Can I see him?" Still admitted? And I asked. Elena folded her hands neatly. I told her you were awake and medically stable, and she went quiet. That was the third crack. Marissa wasn't relieved. She wasn't emotional. She was silent. That night, I called my attorney, Nolan Briggs. He had been my father's lawyer before mine. If something felt off, Nolan knew how to examine it without overreacting. He arrived before dusk. I told him about the transfers, the beneficiary change, the guardianship inquiry. Elena had quietly mentioned Marissa asking about through hospital administration. Nolan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. "Graham," he said carefully, "has your wife ever had financial trouble?" I didn't fully understand. The question lingered. I thought about late-night phone calls she'd stepped outside to take, about a black SUV I'd seen parked near our house twice in the past month, About the unfamiliar garage she insisted on using for my brake service a week before the accident. The snow had fallen heavier that night, and now, lying in a hospital bed, one thought pressed louder than the rest. The brakes hadn't just failed.
They had been serviced.
Nolan didn't panic. That was the first thing that steadied me. He didn't accuse Marissa. He didn't jump to conclusions. He simply asked questions in the same tone he used when reviewing contracts. "Let's slow this down," he said, folding his hands on the edge of the hospital bed. "You had a brake service 1 week before the accident?" "Yes." "Who arranged it?" "Marissa." "And the shop?" "Not our usual mechanic. She said they had a winter special." Nolan nodded once.
"Have you seen the receipt?"
"No." Darasa sat between us longer than I liked. He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to do 3 things," he said calmly. "First, freeze all pending transfers. Second, flag your life insurance change request. Third, request the official accident report." I watched him work, feeling a strange mixture of humiliation and clarity. I had trusted my wife with everything, and now I was asking my attorney to protect me from her. Elena returned just as Nolan finished his calls. "She's been emailing hospital administration," Elena said quietly. "About what?" I asked. "About capacity evaluations. She asked whether post-concussion patients sometimes show delayed confusion." Nolan's eyes lifted slowly to mine. "She's building a paper trail," he said. "For what?" "Guardianship, or at least leverage." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, but recognition. Marissa didn't do anything impulsively. If she was laying groundwork, it meant she had a reason. That evening, Nolan returned with a preliminary accident summary. "No sign of black ice," he said. "Weather was bad, but not unusual. No collision reported." "What about another vehicle?" I asked. "Highway camera picked up headlights behind you before the curve," he said. "Too distant for plates." I closed my eyes briefly. I remembered the SUV idling after I ran over. "Derek's going to look into the toll records," Nolan continued. "Your car was transported to a private yard, not the insurance lot." "Why would that matter?" "Because private yards don't always preserve evidence," he said. That word again, evidence. It sounded foreign in the context of a marriage. My phone vibrated on the bedside table. Marissa. I let it ring. A text came through instead. "We need to talk. People are asking questions." People. Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry." I typed slowly. "Why did you change the beneficiary on my policy?" The typing indicator appeared, disappeared. Then came the reply. "Medical bills are unpredictable. I was protecting us." Protecting us. The same word she'd used in arguments when she overspent. The same word she used when she insisted I didn't need to review statements. Elena glanced at me. "Do you want to see her?" I thought about that carefully. 12 years of shared holidays, shared plans, shared mortgage payments, and a brake service I had never personally verified. "No," I said finally, "not yet." Later that night, Derek called. "I got something," he said. His voice carried the tone he used back when he worked emergency response. Measured, serious. "The garage your wife used," he continued. "It's owned by a guy named Lucas Hart." The name struck something faint in my memory. "Does that mean anything to you?" I thought about the black SUV again, about a tall man I'd once seen in our driveway when I came home early from work. Marissa had said he was just helping with something. "What else?" I asked quietly. "Lucas Hart has been seen driving a black SUV," Derek replied. Silence filled the line. And Derek added carefully, he filed for bankruptcy last year. High debt, gambling related. The pieces didn't slam into place. They slid slowly, deliberately. Marissa's rising credit balances, unexplained cash withdrawals, the brake service, the SUV, the beneficiary change 3 days after the crash, not the first day, the third, as if she had waited, as if she needed confirmation that I wasn't waking up. I didn't sleep much that night. Pain kept me awake, but it wasn't the ribs. It was the math. Marissa didn't act without calculation. That was something I'd always admired about her. She was organized, strategic, careful with appearances. If Lucas Hart owned the garage, and Lucas drove a black SUV, and Lucas had a serious gambling debt, then none of this was random. The next morning, Nolan arrived with something new. I subpoenaed preliminary financial disclosures from Lucas Hart's business, he said. Nothing illegal yet, but there's a pattern. What kind of pattern? Cash injections over the last 6 months. Small amounts at first, then larger. My stomach tightened. How large? 5,000? 10,000? 20? I stared at him. How from our accounts? Not directly, Nolan replied. From a secondary credit line opened in Marissa's name. A secondary credit line? I felt foolish for not knowing. She said the spa membership was promotional, I muttered. Nolan didn't smile. Graham, he said gently, debt creates pressure. Pressure creates decisions. I thought about Lucas again. A man drowning financially. A woman trying to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. A marriage built on shared stability. And then an accident. A crash that would have paid out a 7-figure life insurance policy. Silence filled the hospital room. She wouldn't, I began. But I couldn't finish the sentence. Not yet. Derek stopped by in the afternoon with coffee and a flash drive. Traffic cam footage, he said. Doesn't show plates, but it confirms the SUV behind you slowed after you went over. I watched the grainy clip on the tablet. Headlights followed my car into the curve. When my vehicle disappeared over the barrier, the SUV braked, paused, then drove away. Not panic, not shock. Pause. The kind of pause someone makes when they're checking an outcome. Elena stepped into the room while the video replayed. She's online again, she said quietly. Online? I asked. Live stream. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she was. Derek handed me my phone. Marissa appeared on the screen sitting at our kitchen table, hands clasped tightly. I didn't want to make this public, she began, her voice carefully restrained. But I'm concerned about Graham. Concerned? The word almost made me laugh. He suffered a head injury, she continued. Since then, he's been suspicious, withdrawn, listening to people who don't understand our marriage. The comments scrolled rapidly. Prayers for you. Brain injuries change people. Protect yourself legally. She lowered her voice slightly. I'm considering guardianship only temporarily until he's stable. There it was. Not emotional, not explosive, strategic. She wasn't accusing me of violence. She was questioning my clarity. If she convinced enough people that I was confused, then any accusation I made would sound like paranoia. It was brilliant and terrifying. Nolan took the phone gently from my hand. She's positioning, he said, not attacking. She's isolating me, I replied. Yes, and she's using sympathy. Yes. Derek folded his arms. What's the play? Nolan looked at me carefully. You don't respond publicly, he said. Not yet. We build facts. We let her commit to the narrative. How long? I asked. As long as it takes for her to overextend. That night, Marissa texted again. You're embarrassing yourself. Please stop letting them manipulate you. Them? She was already reframing. Nolan, Derek, anyone who questioned her. I typed slowly. Why did you use Lucas Hart's garage? No immediate response. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, because it was affordable, stop making everything suspicious. Affordable for a break service that nearly killed me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I looked at Nolan. She thinks I don't have proof, I said. And he asked, she thinks I'll doubt myself. Nolan nodded once. She's betting on your loyalty. I exhaled slowly. That was the real weapon. Not sabotage, not money. History. 12 years of shared life. And she was counting on it. But loyalty only works when it runs both ways. By the time I was discharged, Marissa's version of the story had already started circulating. Not aggressively, not dramatically, strategically. She wasn't accusing me of anything criminal. She was planting doubt. Graham's under a lot of stress. Head injuries can change behavior. He's isolating himself. She never used the word unstable. She didn't have to. Derek drove me to his house instead of home. Nolan insisted on it. If she's preparing a guardianship argument, he said, you don't want to be in a shared property. Too easy to claim confusion. That stung more than I expected. I wasn't hiding from my wife. I was protecting myself from her. The first call came from Harold Bennett at the firm. Graham, he began carefully. We've seen the video. I figured there's concern, he continued. Nothing formal. But if there's even a question of capacity, we need documentation. I'm medically cleared, I replied. I know, he said quickly, but perception matters. That was the problem, perception. Marissa understood it better than anyone. She'd built her life on presentation, the perfect home, the curated vacations, the way she'd introduced me at charity events as the steady one. Now she was reframing me as confused. Not malicious, not cruel, just unwell. It was clever. A few hours later, Nolan returned with something more concrete. The insurance company flagged the beneficiary change request, he said. They contacted your office for confirmation. It wasn't processed. Because I was unconscious. Because you didn't authorize it. He placed another folder on the table. Lucas Hart withdrew $25,000 in cash 2 days before your accident, Nolan said. Deposited into a personal account tied to Marissa's credit line. My chest tightened. Coincidence? I asked. Possible, he replied evenly, but unlikely. Derek leaned against the kitchen counter. You know what bothers me? He said. What? The timing. 3 days after the crash, I said quietly. Derek nodded. She waited, he said. Not for you to wake up, for confirmation. The room felt smaller. Marissa wasn't reckless. She was patient. She had waited 3 days before attempting large transfers, long enough to see if I would regain consciousness, long enough to confirm whether she'd need to pivot from insurance payout to guardianship. My phone buzzed. Another live stream notification. This time, she was seated beside a well-dressed man I didn't recognize. My legal advisor, she introduced him calmly. We're exploring options to ensure Graham's safety. Legal advisor, not Nolan, someone else. Temporary oversight is common after head trauma, the man said smoothly. It protects assets from poor decisions. Poor decisions. I muted the video. She's escalating, Derek said. She's formalizing, Nolan corrected. That was worse. She wants me to respond emotionally, I said. Yes, Nolan agreed, because emotion looks unstable. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. I won't give her that. Nolan watched me carefully. What are you thinking? She thrives in controlled environments, I said slowly. Social spaces, public sympathy. Yes. She has an event this weekend, I continued. The Milwaukee Business Association Gala. Derek raised an eyebrow. You just got out of the hospital. I know. Nolan's expression shifted slightly. You're considering attending. I'm considering reclaiming the narrative. Silence filled the room. She's been telling everyone I'm confused, I said. So I show up calm, clear, with documentation. Derek folded his arms. And if she doubles down? She will, Nolan said. I nodded. And that's when she'll make a mistake. Marissa wasn't prepared for me to stand in the same room as her version of me. She expected absence. She expected silence. She expected doubt. Instead, she was going to get clarity. That night, I sent one message. See you Saturday. A reply came almost instantly. I don't think that's a good idea. For the first time since the accident, I allowed myself a small, steady breath. If it wasn't a good idea for her, then it was exactly what I needed to do. The night of the gala, I almost stayed home. Not because I was afraid of Marissa, but because I was tired. My ribs still ached when I moved too quickly. The concussion left a faint pressure behind my eyes that flared under bright lights. The sensible part of me knew that walking into a ballroom full of people who had just watched my wife question my stability wasn't medically ideal. But this wasn't about comfort. It was about credibility. The Milwaukee Business Association Gala was always polished to the point of intimidation. Chandeliers, string quartet, a sea of tailored tuxedos and silk gowns. Marissa loved events like this. She knew exactly how to float from one conversation to the next, laugh at the right moment, lean in just close enough to create intimacy without impropriety. Presentation was her strength, and tonight she believed the room was hers. Derek drove. Nolan rode in the back, reviewing a thin folder one last time. Remember, Nolan said calmly, we're not accusing, we're clarifying. I nodded. Medical clearance letter, he asked. In my pocket. Insurance documentation with you and the forensic note. He tapped the folder. Preliminary confirmation of brake tampering. Nothing instructional, just findings. That part had been careful. Derek's connection at the impound yard had preserved fluid samples before the vehicle was processed. Independent testing confirmed contamination, a foreign substance introduced into the brake system. Not enough to cause immediate failure, enough to degrade performance under stress. Deliberate, subtle, harder to trace, safer to present. When we entered the ballroom, conversation softened almost immediately. I felt eyes on the bandage near my temple. Marissa stood near the center of the room in a navy gown, this time not red, understated, controlled. She saw me. The shift in her expression lasted less than a second. Surprise, then recalibration. She moved toward me with practiced composure. Graham, she said gently, touching my arm. You shouldn't be here. I'm fine, I replied evenly. You need rest, she insisted, loud enough for others to hear. You've been under a lot of stress. There it was again. Stress. Not confusion, not incompetence. Just enough doubt. Judith Hale approached before I could respond. As chairwoman of the board, her presence carried weight. Graham, she said warmly, I'm glad you're upright. Fully upright, I replied. Marissa forced a soft smile. He's pushing himself. Judith's gaze shifted subtly to Nolan. I understand there have been concerns, she said carefully. Yes, Nolan replied smoothly, which is why we brought documentation. He handed Judith the medical clearance letter first. Full cognitive assessment completed post-concussion, he explained. No impairment. Judith scanned it briefly. Marissa's smile thinned. That's one opinion, she said lightly. Head injuries can have delayed effects. And financial fraud does not, Nolan replied calmly. The words hung heavier than expected. Conversations around us quieted. Nolan continued, still measured. 3 days after Mr. Cole's accident, significant transfer requests were submitted. Beneficiary changes were initiated, all without his authorization. Marissa's posture stiffened. I was preparing for medical expenses, she said quickly. Then why the life insurance update? Nolan asked softly. Silence. Judith's expression hardened slightly. Marissa recovered fast. This is exactly what I was worried about, she said, turning subtly toward the surrounding guests. He's suspicious, paranoid. He doesn't trust anyone right now. I didn't react. That was important. Instead, I reached into my jacket and removed a single page, the preliminary forensic note. I didn't hand it to the room. I handed it to her. She glanced down, and for the first time her composure fractured. It wasn't dramatic, just a tightening around the eyes, a brief loss of color. Brake system contamination confirmed. Investigation ongoing. No accusations printed, just fact. She looked back up at me. You're making a mistake, she whispered. Am I? I replied quietly. Judith stepped closer. Marissa, she said calmly, if there is an investigation underway, I strongly suggest you consult independent counsel. The shift in the room was subtle but decisive. Investors who had leaned toward Marissa earlier now leaned back. Harold Bennett cleared his throat. We need stability, he said carefully, and clarity. I am stable, I replied evenly. Marissa's gaze darted around the room, measuring the distance she was losing. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She simply stepped back. I won't do this here, she said. That's wise, Judith replied. Marissa left without another word. The string quartet resumed, tentative at first. Judith placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You handled that well, she said. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was balance restored. As we stepped away from the crowd, Nolan's phone buzzed. He read the screen once, then looked at me. She just tried to access her company email remotely, he said calmly. Derek raised an eyebrow. From the parking lot, Nolan added. I felt something settle into place. She's not done, I said. No, Nolan agreed. She's escalating. Marissa didn't wait long. The Monday after the gala, she showed up at my office just before closing. She knows we're watching, he said. She knows we are watching, he said quietly. Let her think we aren't, I replied. Earlier that morning, Nola had coordinated with Detective Alvarez again. No dramatic midnight stakeout this time, just a silent alert system tied to the building's internal cameras. If Marissa attempted to access restricted accounts or the company seal after hours, the notification would go straight to Alvarez. Subtle, measured, like her. At 5:15 p.m., Marissa entered my office. She wore a beige coat, hair pulled back, expression composed. If someone had walked by, they would have seen a woman gathering frame photos from her husband's desk. She moved carefully, too carefully. Her eyes scanned the room as if calculating blind spots. She knows where the camera is, Derek muttered from beside the monitor. Yes, Nolan said, but she doesn't know we upgraded them. Marissa placed a small stack of papers into her handbag. Then she sat down at my desk. She didn't rush. She opened my laptop. It required the password she no longer had. She paused, then pulled out her phone. Within seconds, my inbox showed a login attempt. She was trying to reset credentials through linked accounts, older ones we hadn't updated in years. Derek exhaled slowly. She is still thinking in old patterns, he said. The silent alert triggered. 10 minutes later, Alvarez and 2 uniformed officers entered through the back stairwell. Marissa didn't notice until the office lights brightened slightly. She looked up and froze. "Mrs. Cole," Alvarez said evenly, "please step away from the desk." Her expression shifted, not to panic, to calculation. "I'm retrieving personal items," she replied smoothly. "After business hours?" Alvarez asked. "I'm his wife. That's under review," Nolan said from the doorway. She turned. For a brief second, I saw something real in her eyes. Not anger, not fear. Recognition. "You're enjoying this," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I'm protecting myself." Alvarez stepped forward. "Mrs. Cole, you attempted unauthorized access to financial accounts and company systems. Combined with the ongoing forensic findings, we need you to come with us." She didn't scream. She didn't fight. "You could still fix this," she paused. "You could still fix this," she said softly. "We don't have to destroy everything." That was the closest she came to honesty. I held her eyes for a long moment. "You started destroying it weeks ago," I said quietly. "I'm just closing the door." She didn't respond. The hallway swallowed her footsteps. The trial didn't take long. Forensic analysis confirmed Briggs system contamination. Financial records showed coordinated transfers tied to Lucas Hart's debt accounts. Email logs showed early discussions about guardianship before any medical necessity existed. 7 years, not 10. Not dramatic. Measured. Appropriate. Lucas accepted a separate plea agreement tied to financial misconduct and accessory charges. I saw the house on Willow Ridge. The memories there felt compromised. I moved into a smaller place overlooking Lake Michigan. Quiet mornings, clear air, no hidden credit lines. With the remaining funds, I established a scholarship program for students pursuing ethical business practices in mechanical engineering. It felt right. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived from the correctional facility. Marissa's handwriting was unmistakable. I held the envelope for a long time. There are moments when curiosity disguises itself as closure. But I had learned something important. Not every door deserves reopening. I placed the envelope in the fireplace, watched the paper curl, watched the ink fade. Money reveals character. Crisis exposes it. And love without transparency isn't love at all. It's leverage. If you've ever had to choose between loyalty and self-respect, you understand how hard that line can be to draw. Would you have opened the letter or let it burn? Tell me what you would have done and where you're watching from. We share stories like this every day about resilience, boundaries, and the strength it takes to walk away from what no longer protects you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next.